Can you still try to reach for the divine as you're surrounded by the horrors of your life? That is what we're talking about today on the 10th episode of Double Exposure here on Slim Radio, the show where you get exposed to a show. That's not true. It's a show. You get exposed to a film and an album that are connected by an invisible, mysterious, untangible thread that only I am aware of. But hopefully I can try and illuminate the connection for you. My name is Antonín Tesař and I am your host. And as you can tell by the amount of times that I've misspoken during this very short introduction, I am not at my best. It is too hot outside. We had to turn the AC on in the studio here, and I am in pain. My whole body hurts. This is a little personal. This has nothing to do with the episode. This is just a personal confessional. My whole body hurts because I have tried something. I don't know if you know this. It's called bouldering. Apparently, people try and climb a wall in the most difficult way possible and try to fall. Well, they don't try to fall, but they do fall off. And if you try it, you will fall as well. So I'm bleeding from various parts of my body. And hopefully, if you are in a similar predicament and feeling any kind of pain, today's episode will be a soothing balm for that. What are we listening to today and what are we talking about? We are listening to an album titled Judy Sill by an artist named Judy Sill, easy to remember, from 1971. And it's a folk rock or baroque folk or baroque gospel. It's a mixture of genres, and it is severely underrated and underappreciated. And we will talk about why that is and how that happened, and about the story of the artist herself as well. And the movie that we're pairing with this wonderful album is Twin Peaks: Fire Walk With Me. Now, finally, we get to talk about this movie. I have wanted to do an episode about Fire Walk With Me since we began, but I just couldn't find a good album to pair it with. And finally, I think I found the one. Twin Peaks: Fire Walk With Me is a feature-length sequel to the TV show Twin Peaks, at least the first 2 seasons. So beware, there will be severe spoilers for the first 2 seasons of the show, which if you haven't seen, you are really missing out. So go do that. Before the first song, go and watch the entirety of Twin Peaks, then come back and watch the rest. And before we speak any further about the religious themes, the subversion of genre in Fire Walk With Me, we will begin with the music, because after all, that is what you came here for. So here is track number 1 from Judy Sill, 1971, Crayon Angels.
Crayon angel songs are slightly out of tune, but I'm sure I'm not to blame. Nothing's happened, but I think it will soon. So I sit here waiting for God in a train to the astral plane. Magic rings I made have turned my finger green, and my mystic roses died. Guess reality is not as it seems, so I sit here hoping for truth and a ride to the other side. phony prophet stole the only light I knew, and the darkness softly screamed. Holy visions disappeared from my view, but the angels come back and laugh in my dreams. I wonder what it means. Da 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 da.
That was the first track from the 1971 album Judy Sill, from Judy Sill, the artist. And we are listening to this wonderful album and talking about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me from 1991, directed by David Lynch today. And I think this first song that we listened to is a very nice song. And it encapsulates a lot in this album, in all the features, all the genres, even that Judy Sill draws from. Because, as I mentioned in the introduction, there is a lot of overlap, or a lot. It's a strange, well, not a strange. A strange mixture, let's say, of kind of Wild West influences or Western influences with the fingerstyle guitar, but also Baroque melodies. She cites Bach as one of her influences, but also Ray Charles. So you can already see the diversity there. Also gospel, obviously. Actually, Judy Sill had the training of a gospel musician when she learned to play organ during her stay in an institution that I won't say what it was just yet, because it is a part of her larger life story, which I think is best to be presented as a continuous story rather than just bits and pieces. And of course, also the religious themes, not just in the music being gospel-like, but also, well, the title is literally Crying Angels, which sounds suspiciously close to Crying Angels, perhaps. And also the very first line is Crying Angels songs are slightly out of tune. And now this kind of brings back what we were talking about last episode, which was Karel Kryl and his album Bratřičku zavírej vrátka, which also was pretty heavy with religious imagery and themes. But I think there is a very big difference in the way both of these artists choose to incorporate these influences. Not saying that one is better or worse, but with Karel Kryl, for example, we had a very, very raw musical element and a raw musical side, and the religious imagery served more as oftentimes an allusion or allegory for a vehicle, let's say, for a political message or an anti-war message or some sort of other message. And it was often very specific, using, biblical stories or what have you. Whereas Judy Sill here, it's more abstract. It's more religious in the purest sense of the word, where she's trying to express her faith through the music and basically find some hope. And that will be a very recurring theme with this album, but also with the film today, and that is finding hope in spite of darkness. But before we introduce the life of Judy Sill and also the movie, let's listen to the second song of the album, and that is The Phantom Cowboy. Once again, some Western influences.
I have seen the phantom cowboy ride, his trail of dust is in my dreams. With an eagle on his shoulder through the clouds he glides and sprints across the spatial streams. But the ledge is steep and the light is dark, still I see him leap, and he keeps on heading for a star that's not very far. He's traveling on a silver filigree. I've been waiting at the eastern gate, I wave my hand to flag him down. I always hope to catch him, but he just can't wait. He's not allowed to reach the ground, but his touch can heal when the light is dark. Doesn't need a shield, 'cause he keeps on heading for a star that's not very far. He likes it all just because it's real. Though I'm sitting in the grit and grime, the spark of hope is in me strong. I'm gonna try to get there in the nick of time, and maybe I can ride along if I have no fear. When the light is dark, I can feel you near. Though you keep on heading for a star that's not very far, please don't forget, if your way is clear, I'll be waiting here. Do-ba-do-do-do-do-do.
And that was The Phantom Cowboy, the second track of Judy Sills' eponymous album from 1971. So let's talk about Judy Sill for a second. She was born October 7th, 1944 in Studio City, Los Angeles. And her first encounter with music was through her father, who taught her piano. He owned a bar in Oakland, and tragically died of pneumonia when Judy was 8 years old. And after his death, Judy's mother remarried. She married an abusive, alcoholic animator. So later, Judy Sill would describe this period of her home life as frequently violent, leading to Judy fleeing her home by her mid-teens and starting to associate with criminals. At already age 15, she committed a series of armed robberies. So those were gas stations, liquor stores, and so on, with a boyfriend. Consequently, she was arrested, sentenced to 9 months in reform school, where she coincidentally also started playing the organ. She became the church organist. And the gospel music was her first serious musical education. Which you can again definitely hear in her music, although it is definitely not purely gospel either. And I want to correct myself, because in the last segment, before the last song, I said that if you're religious in the purest form of the word, I would say actually spiritual. Not religious, spiritual. Because she's not operating within any dogmatic framework. Well, obviously it's a Christian, so it's Christian motifs, but you can sort of hear and feel that it's more of a construction of her own, of someone who's been through a lot of tough times, building their own private theology that is derived from Christianity, perhaps, but it is not just regurgitating old known stories and themes. But after reform school, she attended college briefly, dropped out when her mother died in 1964, and after that began using LSD and soon after heroin. She married pianist Bob Harris, and together they developed a severe heroin addiction, which they funded through criminal activities, including forgery, fraud, and prostitution as well. And she was imprisoned once again. But in prison, she had decided that she will after being released, finally pursue her true passion, which is songwriting and music. And there is a quote from her saying that what she wants is to be the greatest songwriter to ever have lived. And this accolade didn't come to her during her lifetime, but there are definitely people today who would attribute that description to her. So she started writing songs after being released from prison. Once again, a combination of Bach, Ray Charles, gospel, angels, salvation, cosmic cowboys. And, at first you might think, okay, well, that's a bit dissonant in terms of her life. Okay, well, so he's a drug addict who keeps committing crimes, and suddenly she's writing about angels and heavens and Jesus. Well, that's why it makes sense at the same time, right? Because she is an example of someone who had gone through really difficult times, through hell, you could even say. And that is why I think also the song carries so much emotion, because it is not just someone who knows that hard times can exist and think that music could help, so they write about Jesus Christ. But she is someone who genuinely is trying to find, again, hope through music. The album that we're listening to today, Judy Sill, is her debut album, which she wrote after she actually sold one of the songs that appears on the album to The Turtles, which was another band at the time, which kind of made her more visible in the music industry. And she was the first artist signed to Asylum Records with this album. And when it came out, critics loved it, and almost nobody bought it. I feel like you can start seeing a pattern here with the with the artists that we talk about on this show, because if you recall Nick Drake, he had a fairly similar fate, and actually also around a similar time period, with undisputable talent, a mixture of genres, and very emotional songs, which just don't resonate with the audiences of the time commercially. Her second album, titled Heart Food, came out 2 years later in 1973. And it was the same story. She didn't see any commercial success, although critics enjoyed the album. And unfortunately, after that, her life took a downturn once again with a car accident, which led to a failed back surgery, chronic pain, and relapse into her drug addiction. With the commercial failure of her second album, her contract also ended with the label. And although she had began working on a third album, and the demos later got turned into a posthumous release, she was found dead on November 23rd, 1979, in her North Hollywood apartment from acute cocaine and codeine intoxication. She was 35, and at that point, she had been largely forgotten. She has been rediscovered since, hence also us listening to her today, because she has had an enormous influence on artists from the 70s all the way to today, such as the Fleet Foxes or Adrian Lenker and Big Thief as a whole. But more on Judy Sill a bit later. Because after the next song, we will go into what connects this specific album to Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me, after the third track of the album, The Archetypal Man.
Fleeter even than Mercury, he flies His moon mirage is shining through his veins, flows a fool's gold flood, but through the rose in his hand flows blood.
And that was the third track, The Archetypal Man from Judy Sill from 1971 by Judy Sill. We're listening to Judy Sill by Judy Sill, and we are talking about the film Fire Walk with Me. Now, I did say that right now we would talk about how it's connected to the album, thematically or otherwise. But that was a lie, actually, because first we need to even introduce not just Twin Peaks, but also David Lynch as an artist. Because without David Lynch, there is no Twin Peaks. Although he wasn't the sole creator, which is often overlooked. Twin Peaks, of course, as a TV show, was a collaborative work of many, and primarily Mark Frost, who co-created Twin Peaks with David Lynch. But anyway, Twin Peaks was a TV series created by the two aforementioned artists, first broadcast in 1990, and it begins and also revolves around the discovery of a dead body, that of a Laura Palmer, a 17-year-old high school prom queen wrapped in plastic on a riverbank in a small town in rural Washington. Now, of course, Twin Peaks is a very famous, I wouldn't be afraid to say, TV show, almost legendary, because even though it is at this point more than 30 years old, people still watch it and watch it for the first time and appreciate it. I think especially in the last 2 years, there's been a resurgence, partly, unfortunately, due to David Lynch's passing in January of 2025, which definitely contributed to this spike in interest in his body of work, which is, of course, amazing, but it is quite sad it took that for the resurgence to happen. But what can you do? So finding Laura Palmer is the start, but what happens after? Well, we follow FBI agent Dale Cooper, who comes to this town of Twin Peaks to investigate Laura Palmer's murder. And it's a show. It's very unique. It's very unique, and I feel like everybody loves it for a bit of a different reason. I mean, obviously you have the kind of the mythology of David Lynch and of Twin Peaks, the red room with the black and white floor, people talking backwards, and the owls are not what they seem, and mystery in the air. Mystery is in the air. That's how David Lynch described kind of the atmosphere of the first episode of the pilot. There is something dark lurking in the woods. But it's also and it's also the quirky characters which feel human at the same time, even though they fulfill typical soap opera tropes. And this combination, I mean, obviously the whole show is not perfect. I mean, even David Lynch would tell you that, because he did step back for a second to go direct another movie, Wild at Heart. And he said that once he came back, he actually didn't really recognize the show that he created, because it was a runaway train that he said would take 24/7 commitments to keep under control. And actually, Fire Walk with Me, the film, is sort of a response to this feeling of going. It's a going back to basics. With in terms of the show's atmosphere and themes and what it's about. Now, once again, I warn you, very, 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 very serious spoilers ahead. The whole mystery of who killed Laura Palmer will be revealed in the next couple of minutes, because that is sort of that was the phenomenon. That is what kind of drove audiences crazy in the early 90s when the show was coming out. Who killed Laura Palmer? Who is the perpetrator? Because it was people were used to this typical format of murder mysteries, and okay, well, the point of a murder mystery is to find out who the killer is. And David Lynch actually didn't want to reveal this. His original plan was to just never tell people. Of course, you might say, okay, well, it's a bit silly, but David Lynch did not abide by what the what I don't want to say what the viewers wanted, because of course he didn't just want to subvert expectations for the sake of doing that. Looking at you, showrunners of the Game of Thrones, but he wanted to do things for a reason and not just reveal the killer because it's expect of him to, and also because he didn't believe that the killer was the point. You know, it was about why it happened. It was about the town. It was about the reaction. It was about Laura Palmer as a character and the echoes that she left in the city even after her death. But despite this, the studio forced Lynch's hand, and in the middle of the second season, he was forced to do the big reveal and tell viewers that it was in fact, spoilers, Laura's father, Leland, who had killed her. Not only had killed her, but was abusing her for years. And it's a terrifying moment in the show, of course, because up until then we see Leland as this grieving father who is basically going insane from the sadness. He bursts into sudden dances out of nowhere when he hears music that reminds him of Laura. And the thought of him being the one who caused all of this, who did this to her, is just so unfathomable at that point. It's also not. It's not that it wouldn't make sense, because you can afterwards connect the dots and see, okay, well, it does make sense. But it's just that you never at one point would have wanted this to be the answer. That all this time the violence and the abuse came from within the house, from within her family. But after that, the show goes on. David Lynch, again, steps back, and the show kind of loses its track for a second. There are subplots that a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of. But at the end of season 2, we go back to David Lynch, and he directs, I think, the last 2 episodes. And we get a massive cliffhanger at the end when Agent Dale Cooper goes to the Black Lodge, to the Red Room, to find his love Annie, and to get stuck, and an evil doppelganger of him is created. And this all makes sense if you watch the show, trust me. And at the end, it's revealed that the person that was found by the cops and then brought back, and that made it out of the Red Room, is not in fact the real Special Agent Dale Cooper, but is the evil doppelganger. And that is where David Lynch leaves the audiences. And after that, Twin Peaks was actually cancelled by the studio. But not too long after, David Lynch announced that he is doing a movie. He was working on Firewalk with me. And to the dismay of a lot of the fans at the time, he chose to not answer all the lingering questions about what did all of this mean? Where did all this magic come from? Why were the owls there? Why is the Red Room red? Why are the people talking backwards? What happened with this? Why did that lady turn into a doorknob? It's actually also something that happens in a movie. No, David Lynch decides to go back to the one to the one mystery that has already been answered, and that is, who killed Laura Palmer, and Laura Palmer herself. And Fire Walk with Me is a prequel of of Laura Palmer's last day on Earth, from her point of view. And on paper, not bringing anything new to the table, but only telling us, okay, what we already knew. Leland Palmer is the killer. Laura Palmer gets killed in the woods, in the train car, and that's it. So people weren't happy. The movie release, the movie is first shown at Cannes. It's booed. Critics hate it. I think Quentin Tarantino famously said that after seeing this movie that David Lynch is so far up his own ass that whatever. And also the tone was very different, because once again the show itself it is of course dark, because the whole subject matter is dark. There's murder and abuse and abduction and so on, but at the same time you have sort of this warmth coming from the characters and from the town itself, and the soap opera-y moments and the quirkiness that kind of creates this almost a wholesome atmosphere. But that is all gone in Fire Walk with Me. It is purely dark. It is explicit. It is uncomfortable to watch. It is a horror film, after all. It's a horror film of a victim finding out who her abuser is after God knows how many years, about 6 years or 5 years of abuse. But that is because that's what was at the heart of Twin Peaks for David Lynch. It was Laura Palmer. It wasn't for him. He was unhappy also in reaction, or he didn't want the victim to be just a faceless, nameless body that is found. Okay, and it's, okay, a woman got murdered, on whatever. Now let's focus on the fun, on the detectives finding out who the killer is, and let's even focus more on the killer, because we know that those are the masterminds. No, David Lynch wanted to give us an insight into Laura Palmer's inner life and allow the victim herself to be the main character of her own film, which was pretty uncommon, especially in the psychological thriller genre at the time, such as The Silence of the Lamb and so on. And you might be wondering at this point, how is this all connected with the music that we've been listening to? Well, let's talk about that after the next song, which is The Lamb Ran Away with the Crown, the fourth track of this album, Judy Seal, from 1971.
Once I heard a serpent remark, if you try to evoke the spark, you can fly through the dark with a red midnight raven to rule the battleground. So I drew my sword and got ready, but the lamb ran away with the crown. So I drew my sword and got ready, but the lamb ran away with the crown. Ba-da-da. Though the beast within me's a liar, he made me glow with a strange desire, and I rode on the fire with a blue sacred opal to bless the battleground. But I turned to see its reflection, and the lamb ran away with the crown. But I turned to see its reflection, and the lamb ran away with the crown. Once a demon lived in my brow. I screamed and wailed and I cursed out loud, and I sailed through the clouds on 10 crested cardinals to guard my battleground. But I laughed laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the crown. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried, and the lamb ran away with the lamb. But I laughed so hard I cried
And that was the fourth track from Judy Sill's 1971 album, Judy Sill. We're listening to Judy Sill, and we are talking about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And I just told you about a bit of background about Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me, and the negative reactions it received when it released, because people were just not that interested, unfortunately, in the life of the person that died before the show even started, but they wanted to know what happened to our favorite guy, Dale Cooper. But they didn't get that. But right now, I'm actually going to make the executive decision to continue with the music so that we don't end up with, I talk for half an hour and then there's just music for half an hour because it's kind of unbalanced. And I've been talking for a long time. So let's keep listening for now. The next track, Lady O. Again, one of the first tracks that was written for this album. Also, by the way, the songs on this album, very intricate as you can hear. Sometimes they start kind of similar to each other with the little guitar. It always kind of sounds the same. But then once they hit the bridge or the chorus, all the harmonies come in and it's just so beautiful. I love it. And Lady O, yeah. So, and they took a long time as well. So a song, she said, could take a year before actually it was the way she wanted it to be. But yeah, Lady O, fifth track of this album.
While you sit and seek a crescent moon is laying at your feet with hope that's made of sand. You don't think you can, but you have held it all in your hand. Lady O, I've been trying hard to keep from leaving you, but from the start my heart just rolled and flowed. I've seen where it goes and still somehow my love for you grows. Lady O,
And that was Lady O, the fifth track from Judy Sill, 1971. Now, of course, it would be silly to say that Judy Sill and Laura Palmer are the same. After all, one is a real person who lived and died and wrote beautiful music, and the other is a fictional TV character. Nevertheless, we can see some connections in the way that they are either framed, as in the case of Laura Palmer, and how their lives and their struggles and their hopes and how they try to cope with that are shown. And in the case of Judy Sill, how they cope through their own art. Because even though, because both are the kind of sort of the same version, or not, sorry, not the same version. The version are versions of the same impossible figure, the young woman who has been through genuine hell, and responds by reaching for something beautiful and transcendent. Because what else is there, right? And also refusing to just give up in a way, which might not make sense right now, but once we get into also how the film ends, it'll all click together. Also, once again, with Laura Palmer, David Lynch rejects the long-running trope of dead girls in fiction. Beautiful, mysterious, but being defined solely by their deaths and often by their killer. He turns this on its head, and he insists on showing Laura Palmer while she was alive. So not as a mystery to be solved, but as a real person with troubles, but also hopes, dreams, and a life ahead that is being torn away from her and ripped from her hands. And as a person to be understood. And with Judy Sill, she can kind of be approached, or her music can be approached in a similar fashion to that trope where, okay, well, here is a troubled, and not just her, by the way, but also a lot of other artists who, for example, had addiction problems and ended up dying prematurely or even committing suicide. Often their art gets filtered through this lens of a troubled artist, or okay, well, their troubles somehow made their art what it was, and if they were happy and whatnot, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be this good. And we already talked about this in the context of Elliott Smith, for example, or Nick Drake even. And it would be easy to just see Judy Sill's music as the same thing, or even as a confessional of like, oh, I did all these horrible things, and now I'm confessing. But it's the pain is there, but it's filtered through this beautiful theology and mythology and cosmic imagery. She's not confessing and basically trying to repent and ask for pity, but she's creating this world, this spiritual world through which she leads us, basically. And of course, the life that she had before informed this music. But it's to say that it's just a primitive reflection of it would be an overstatement. I hope that makes any sense at all. But to tie that together, it's the refusal of just letting the central figure be a victim and nothing else. Right? Both in Twin Peaks and in Judy Sill's music. She's not putting herself into the role of a victim, but it's insisting on beauty and spiritual searching as a real response to real suffering, a genuine attempt to find a framework that can hold this pain that people can go through. Because also, probably important to note, Laura Palmer's character, apart from being abused for a long time, also due to this, starts having drug problems, and starts working as a prostitute and dealing drugs. And even as we see in Firewalk with Me, she is accomplice to a murder in the woods in the middle of the night. And she does basically feel that like something is wrong with her entire life, and she can sense the dread. She has this sense of dread of impending doom and death coming for her. By the way, also, I do recommend reading, if you are interested, The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, where all of these inner thoughts are expanded upon in great detail. And more on this kind of sense of dread, but also combined with being almost magnetically attracted to self-destruction. Jesus Was a Crossmaker, the next track in Judy Seal from 1971.
Silver angels over the sea, please come down, fly and low for me. One time I trusted a stranger 'cause I heard his sweet song, and it was gently enticing me, though there was something wrong. But when I turned, he was gone, blinding me. His song remains reminding me he's a bandit and a heartbreaker. Oh, but Jesus was a crossmaker. Sweet silver angels over the sea, please come down, fly and low for me. He wages war with the devil, a pistol by his side. Though he chases him out windows and won't give him a place to hide, he keeps his door open wide. Fighting him, he lights a lamp, inviting him. He's a bandit and a heartbreaker. Oh, but Jesus was a crossmaker. Sweet silver angels over the sea, please come down, fly and low for me. I hear the thunder come rumbling, the light never looks so dim. I see the junction get nearer, and danger is in the wind, and either road's looking grim. Hiding me, I flee, desire dividing me. He's a bandit and a heartbreaker. Oh, but Jesus was a crossmaker. Yes, Jesus was a crossmaker. Sweet silver angels over the sea, please come down, fly and low for me. One time I trusted a stranger 'cause I heard his sweet song, and it was gently enticing me, though there was something wrong. But when I turned, he was gone, blinding me. His song remains reminding me he's a bandit and a heartbreaker. Oh, but Jesus was a crossmaker. Yes, Jesus was a crossmaker. Oh, but Jesus was a crossmaker. Yes, Jesus was a crossmaker.
That was Jesus Was a Crossmaker, the sixth track from Judy Sill's eponymous album from 1971. We are listening to this wonderful baroque, folk, rock, gospel, whatever else this could be classified as, but we're connecting it to David Lynch's Firewalk with Me, the feature-length sequel to the first two seasons of the legendary TV series Twin Peaks. Now, Jesus was a crossmaker. So the central image, Jesus being the carpenter, so who made the cross he was crucified on, the creator of the instrument of his own suffering. And it's sort of a love song of of love and pain coming from the same source, which for Judy Sill, who lived in a household with which she described as quite violent sometimes, and a partner who was suffering from addiction just like she was. I'm sure this was a very real an emotion that she put into the song, and it's also something that we can see this attraction to distraction, to self-destruction, we can see in Laura Palmer. Excuse me, who first of all thinks that there's something fundamentally wrong with her, and she isn't aware of the abuse that is being, or she is being aware of the abuse, but she senses it as this more nightmarish supernatural phenomenon that is happening to her because she is tainted in some ways or broken, and that is also what leads her to picking up a cocaine addiction and associating with people like Leo the one eye, and working in One Eye Jacks as a prostitute, basically being convinced of her own brokenness or of something being wrong with her is what attracts her then also to these figures and these places that in the end are what brings her the most pain and misery. And in this sense, of course, with these heavy themes such as not just addiction, but also sex abuse and addiction and murder and much more, which is present in Twin Peaks. And on the other hand, the album, the kind of alluded to addiction, abuse, and all the crimes that Judy Seal had committed. It's often controversial, or it was controversial at the time of the movie being released, that it captures these themes with a sort of a sense of in a visually beautiful way, you could say, in the sense of these are very dark and the dark topics that could be addressed in a more raw, documentary style. But for Lynch, of course, and also in a way Judy Sill, they instead went with an approach of beauty, and with Judy Sill, it was of course all this intricate baroque instrumentalization that unfortunately didn't resonate with the audiences at the time, and with David Lynch, it was his signature visual style. But it is a fine edge, because of course you could argue that this is just the aestheticization of suffering, which is also why people labeled Firewalk with Me as exploitative. But on the other hand, the beauty with which these works, with which these characters are framed, is what the characters or the subjects of these works are reaching for in a way. Judy Sill is reaching for salvation through music, and Laura Palmer is reaching for the angel on her wall, and then in the end, the very last scene of the movie, she is reaching to the angel. She wants to be. She was reaching for the transcendental salvation, this beauty. So the question is, what do you reach for in this exactly in this cruel world and in these cruel conditions? And can it be beauty? And in the case of these two works of art, the answer is yes. But we are also running out of time, so let's move on to the next song, the seventh track from this album. We might even make it through the whole album for the first time probably, and that is Ridge Rider.
He rides the ridge between dark and light, without partners or friends. He's courageous enough to be scared, but he's too humble to win. Bless the ridge rider, the ridge he's riding is mighty thin. I guess the ridge rider forgets he's traveling with a friend. He comes from under the cryptosphere, where the great sadness begins, and he doesn't pretend to be brave, though the road's dusty and dim. Bless the ridge rider, the ridge he's riding is mighty thin. I guess the ridge rider forgets he's traveling with a friend. Since the great fall, he's been traveling hard, thinking bondage is sin, hoping someday the path will turn gold and the weight will turn into wind. Bless the ridge rider, the ridge he's riding is mighty thin. I guess the ridge rider forgets he's traveling with a friend. He rides the ridge between dark and light, without partners or friends. He's courageous enough to be scared, but he's too humble to win. Bless the ridge rider, the ridge he's riding is mighty thin. I guess the ridge rider forgets he's traveling with a friend.
And that was Ridge Rider, the seventh track from the album that we've been listening to today, which is Judy Sill from 1971, an album by Judy Sill. And we are short on time, so hopefully what I was saying before was making sense to you, because I'm not going to say much else. So let's dive into the next track, My Man on Love.
One star remains in the false darkness. Have you met my man on love? One truth survives death's silent starkness. Have you met my man on love? No sorrow is like yours, my friend, though silence is your tomb. I'd take your every agony to save you from this doom. But one star remains in the false darkness. Have you met my man on love? One truth survives death's silent starkness. Have you met my man on love? In your eyes is an echo of what once was passion, my friend. If I cried out loud, could you hear these words? Resurrection waits within, 'cause one star remains in the false darkness. Have you met my man on love? One truth survives death's silent starkness. Have you met my man on love? No sorrow is like yours, my friend, though silence is your tomb. I take your every agony to save you from this doom. But one star remains in the false darkness. Have you met my man on love? One truth survives death's silent starkness. Have you met my man on love? Most high, my man on love. Most high, my man on love.
And that was the eighth track of Judy Sill, 1971, My Man on Love. And now let's go into the ninth song. We have three left still. And the next one, I think one of my favorite ones from this album, and it's also the one that got me into Judy Sill. It's the first one that I came across, and I was blown away immediately. So I hope, well, you might not have the same reaction in the context of the whole album, but I hope you will enjoy nevertheless. So here is Lopin' Along Through the Cosmos.
Loping along through the cosmos, and sideways I slide through the square. I'm hoping sweet love of the air. A silver chariot soars through mercury ripples of sky. I'm looking so hard for a place to land. I almost forgot how to fly. So keep on moving or stay by my side. Either way, I'll tell you a secret I've never revealed. However we are is okay. A silver chariot soars through mercury ripples of sky. I'm looking so hard for a place to land. I almost forgot how to fly. So keep on moving or stay by my side. Either way, I'll tell you a secret I've never revealed. However we are is okay.
And there we go. That was the 9th song, Loping Along Through the Cosmos. Really, well, it's not just not just the harmonies and these, like I said before, it's also the chord progressions. And the emotion that it elicits from the listener. Very gentle, but also grand in the cosmic scale, you know. And the next track is once again going with the theme of, well, at this point it's obvious, the cosmos, the heavens, and that is but just Enchanted Sky Machines.
If I told you some secrets, would you say I'm unreal? I could easily love you if you just let me feel. I can't play forever the games I've outgrown, but you're still enchanted sky machines, take all the gentle home. Just needing to touch you is so hard to restrain. Just waiting for the time could maybe make me insane. My heart is so hungry, living on patience alone. Please hurry, enchanted sky machines, take all the gentle home. I believe the beginning won't be too far away. The power's getting stronger, I see signs every day. So I'll swallow my yearning and won't let it be shown until the enchanted sky machines take all the gentle home.
And that was the penultimate track from Judy Seal 1971, Enchanted Sky Machines, of course, referring to angels or other beings leading the faithful ones to salvation. And it is also a very relevant track to almost end on because that is what happens to Laura Palmer at the end of Fire Walk with Me. After being abducted by her father from Leo Johnson's cabin and together with Red Pulaski by her father and taken to the train car, she technically has a choice of either taking a magic ring and thus dying, or not taking the ring and being possessed by sort of a demonic entity, Bob, and continuing and becoming the host and thus continuing the cycle of abuse, which is also another very important theme, not just in Fire Walk with Me, but in all of Twin Peaks. But she in defiance of Dale Cooper, our beloved's main character, advice, she takes the ring, and well, it's not exactly clear what happens. It's still a bit muddy, okay? Well, it's still David Lynch. It's still Twin Peaks, so her soul gets trapped still. Well, she goes into the red room, which is the waiting room between heaven and hell, the white place and the white lodge and the black lodge. And we're confused. Okay, well, she died and she didn't get possessed, so she's not taking on the role of the abuser herself, but what is happening to her? And we see her in the red room with Dale Cooper, who is actually trapped there as well at this point, but actually later because it's a prequel, but also I guess a sequel. It's a bit confusing, but nevertheless, we end with Laura Palmer looking at an angel which appears and crying tears of joy because she did manage to reach that. She couldn't save herself, but she could save her soul. Is that the point that we're making here today? That you should be Christian? I'm not sure. But there is definitely something emotionally rich in all of these that you truly need to experience for yourself for it to have an effect on you. I am just the messenger, okay? I'm just here to play some music, recommend some songs, recommend some movies, but you have to get the emotional meaning yourselves. But regardless, that is what I will leave you with. A hope, a hope for transcendental beauty even in the face of the worst circumstances. And also the recommendation to watch Twin Peaks season 1, then season 2. You have to the middle is kind of rough, but if you make it to the end, you're good. Then Fire Walk with Me. Oh, don't let me get started on season 3 or The Return. That's where things get really weird, but it's worth it. And listen to Judy Sill. Listen also to the other album. Listen to the posthumously released works. And enjoy. And now, that is the last track of the album, the 11th one, Abracadabra, is awaiting. And I wish you a great rest of the afternoon, and also hope you stay tuned to Slim Radio because we have some wonderful shows coming up after this one as well. So long.
Here's to the man who forgot his way home, who silently narrates the confusion of his fight. He feels fights his own darkness, dare he hide from this light? Abracadabra, here's the key to the kingdom. See